Hey, Jonathan here with ScreenSteps. In this video, I'm going to walk through those 5 tips about how to create a ScreenSteps article and some of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm building it out. So I'm going to go through all these tips and just kind of talk through my process, and that hopefully will give you an idea of how you could go about creating your ScreenSteps articles when you're building them out. So the first tip is clarify when somebody's going to be using this article. So in this particular situation, I'm thinking about when a customer support question comes in and they say, hey, we got an invoice, but it doesn't have a PO number on it. Can you update that? So that's going to be somebody from our support team who's going to be handling that particular question. And so I'm thinking about they get a support ticket, they need to go and maybe bring up this article and follow these steps. So then the next tip, which is clarify what the reader needs to do, is after this article, they need to have successfully added a purchase order number to the invoice and then emailed it back to the customer. So then the third thing is, what background knowledge does the reader already have? Well, if they're on our support team, they've already gone through some of the training around our billing system and about that process. So they already have sort of a basic knowledge. Now, they may not know everything. They don't know all the details, but they at least know what our system is, and they know sort of what the process is for getting a purchase order number and an invoice. They've done some training on that. And that could have been classroom training, or they could have gone through a course, but they have some background knowledge. So the next thing is, could we provide additional resources? And yeah, there's a situation where we could include a link out to a specific course, or maybe a video where we describe our billing system, or maybe go into more detail about this kind of situation and what's going on. Another thing is, if we don't want to link out to it, maybe we include a foldable section, and that foldable section might have some details, or maybe a video that's like describing what's going on here. And that could just be a little add-on. And I'll show you how we can handle that in just a moment. And then determining the minimum amount of information that reader needs to handle this. So I've got this article opened, and we're going to go through all of these things here. So first off, this title is not great. So I'm, again, going up to these tips earlier. Tip number 2, what does the reader need to do? Well, they don't just need to learn about purchase orders, they need to do something. So I'm going to change the title of this to be adding a purchase order number to an existing invoice. And this is actually one of the biggest helps when you're first creating content, if you're new to creating stuff in ScreenSteps. Making that title very clear is a huge help to writing a great article that employees are going to use. If you get away from the generic purchase order and actually maybe add a verb and some specifics, adding a purchase order number, not just to an invoice, but to an existing invoice, right? So I'm just going to give a little bit of I already had the article built out over here, so I'm just going to kind of build it gradually here to show you. But we might add a paragraph just describing if a customer needs you to include a PO on the existing invoice that's already sent out, follow these instructions for adding the PO number. All right, so we're not getting into details about what purchase orders are, what invoices are, what our billing system is. We're just giving a little bit of, hey, if this is your situation, you're in the right place. That's going to help them out. So next thing I would do, and I've already grabbed all of these, so you don't have to watch me do it, but I've got screenshots of the different steps. So this is guiding our support team through these steps of how do you actually add the purchase order number. And it walks them through. Now again, they're already familiar with the system. They've had a little bit of training on the system. They're already familiar with our process that people get invoices and sometimes they need purchase orders. So we don't need to get into a lot of details there. Now if we did, we could add a foldable section. And so I'm just going to drop in a heading here. And I'm going to make that a foldable section. So if somebody's reading this and like, I remember, I went through some trainings, like I know a little bit, I actually want to learn a little bit more about this. Well, this foldable section has some hyperlinks to additional resources. It could be videos, it could be courses, it could just be other articles that maybe give a little bit more detail. But the idea is that if the reader wanted to, they could, but it's not really expected or necessary. So then we're just going to add some headings in here that are going to walk the reader, kind of help them scan through this article. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this over. All right, so this first heading is just navigate to subscription, and then we just have headings for each of these other screenshots. So I'm going to drag and drop them over. I already, again, have an article that I've completed over here just to help speed things along so it doesn't take too long to watch. All right, so now I've got headings for all of these, and I'm actually going to just bump all these images underneath. I'm going to indent those over there. All right, so now we've got this article adding a purchase order number to an existing invoice. We have a little bit of just helping them understand if they're in the right place, if this scenario fits. We have a way to get more information if they need it, a foldable section. But then we just walk them through a little bit of what to do. And again, so I'm thinking of tip number 5 here. What's the minimum amount of information that the reader is going to need to perform, to perform this task? And this really is, it's like the bare minimum. Now, is this sufficient? Well, the only way I'm really going to know if this is sufficient is when I send this out to our support team and they start using this to handle this transaction. And if they make a mistake or if they have a lot of follow-up questions, then I might need to revisit this. And actually, a really great tip is to, when you're first getting these rolling out articles, is to do a screen share and watch your employees go through the articles as they perform the task. And that just gives you a clear idea is, are you being clear? Are you adding too much information, too little information? Like, what's the right balance there? So let me actually just save and publish this, and we'll take a peek at what this looks like. We'll see if, and just talk about, again, these 5 tips in how this article looks. All right, so when we're thinking about tip number 1, clarifying when somebody's going to use this article, I have thought of the person who's using this. It's our support team. They get an email with a request to add the purchase order number. All right. Then the second thing is, what do they need to do? And I've identified they need to add a purchase order number to an existing invoice. I've thought about their background information. Right. They already know our system, so I don't need to include a bunch of details. But if they do want more, they can pull these up and go to any one of these resources. And then minimum amount of information here is just the sort of the bare bones. Okay, do this, do this, do this. We don't need a lot of extra explanation. Now, again, this is one example of an article. Now, there might be other article types that you're going to create that would match the situation better. And that's really the idea is we want to identify what is the scenario happening, who's using this, how much information do they need, what's the best format for their situation. And your article might look slightly different than this based on your employees and their situations. And the goal here really is to just make an asset, a learning asset that your employees can use in those moments of need. And in this situation, it's a moment of apply. Email or a phone call, can they use this and follow it to accomplish this task? So hopefully that was helpful to watch me build out an article with those 5 tips in mind.